Earthborn human warriors were the subjects of barely concealed alien snickers and snide remarks as Dennis Foster marched into the Galactic Council chamber on the neutral space station Concordia. The insectoid Sheliak ambassador Pryler burst into uproarious laughter, slapping his chitinous thigh. "You summon a human soldier. You entrust our survival to one of these primitive apes. They battle with sticks and stones on their benighted homeworld. Let's hope he doesn't fling excrement at us." Pryler snorted. Dennis ground his teeth but remained silent. He was here on council orders and had to keep his human temper in check, no matter how infuriating the alien mockery grew. "We face dire circumstances," said the avian High Counselor, her feathers ruffling anxiously. "The rogue Sheliak warlord Carax has seized a planet rich in promethium, a mineral essential to our existence. He massacres the native population and threatens the galaxy's very foundations with his genetically engineered army. Time is of the essence." Their scaled delegate chimed in. Sending a multi-species force could ignite a catastrophic galactic war, but perhaps a small elite human team could infiltrate Carax's fortress unseen and remove his head before more blood paints the stars. Pryler buzzed in outrage. "This is preposterous. Carax commands my most vicious brood brothers, one human against a legion of Sheliak super soldiers. It's tantamount to spitting into a black hole." The councillors argued back and forth. Dennis stood quietly at parade rest as the voices washed over him. Typical political squabbling while innocents suffered and died under a tyrant's claw. "I'll do it," Dennis interrupted, his voice echoing through the chamber and silencing the debate. "Give me a dozen of my most ruthless men and a crate of cold steel. We'll carve a path to Carax and send him screaming to whatever hell spawned him. Then maybe you'll see why no sane being picks a fight with a human." The councillors exchanged uncertain glances, a suicide mission against impossible odds. Yet what choice remained? Dennis Foster might be their last hope against the scourge of Carax. At least, the human looked like he was carved from battle scars and bad attitude. The humans had to prevail or witness the death of billions and the enslavement of a galaxy. As Dennis exited into the Stark Station corridors to assemble his strike team, he pondered what the arrogant aliens didn't grasp. When you backed humanity into a corner, when slaughter and subjugation were the only alternatives, that's when humans got really goddamn dangerous. That's when the horrors of Earth were unleashed. Carax and his Sheliak horde were about to get one hell of an education. Dennis called in his most trusted soldiers to brief them on the mission parameters and plan their infiltration of Carax's stronghold. "Livewire, I need your slicing skills to get us past their security systems undetected. Boom Boom, pack enough ordnance to level a mountain if things go sideways. This won't be easy." Sergeant Nguyen nodded, her fingers already dancing across a datapad, studying schematics of Sheliak bases. Corporal Jackson flashed a wolfish grin, lovingly polishing a block of high-yield explosives. "The fortress is shielded and heavily defended," Dennis continued. "We go in quiet, gather intel, find the shield generator. Once it's down, the fleet can bombard from orbit." As the humans checked weapons and finalized plans, the briefing room doors hissed open. Pryler strutted in, flanked by a dozen Sheliak commandos in full battle regalia. "The Council insists we oversee this operation," Pryler buzzed, "to ensure competence." Dennis felt his hackles rise but kept his face impassive. "My team works alone." "Not this time, monkey," Pryler sneered. "The Sheliak will not let primitives bumble about unattended." Livewire and Boom Boom reached for their sidearms, but Dennis waved them down. Antagonizing the arrogant insects would only make the mission harder. "Fine," Dennis spat. "Just stay out of our way." The humans and Sheliak boarded a stealth dropship, the atmosphere thick with unspoken hostility. As they rocketed towards Carax's planet, the human pilot suddenly yanked the controls hard. The ship lurched and spun. "Proximity alert," the pilot called out. "They've made us!" A flash of orange light and a thunderous explosion. Alarms blared as the dropship careened out of control, plummeting into the jungle canopy far below. Trees splintered, and metal shrieked as the ship augured into the dense foliage. "Silence," Then a hatch blew open and Dennis crawled out, bleeding from a dozen lacerations. He stumbled to his feet and surveyed the burning wreckage strewn across the forest. No sign of Livewire, Boom Boom, or the other humans. Sheliak soldiers dragged themselves from the twisted debris, clicking and hissing in pain and fury. Prylar emerged, ichor oozing from a crack in his carapace. He fixed all four eyes on Dennis with murderous loathing. "This is your fault, Ape. Your incompetence has doomed us all." Dennis wiped blood from his eyes and unslung his pulse rifle. They were scattered, lost with no supplies on a hostile world. But Dennis Foster had a mission to complete, and he'd be damned if he'd let pain or aliens stop him. "Stow that shit and move out," Dennis growled. "We're behind enemy lines now, and we've got a warlord to kill." Dennis stumbled through the undergrowth, pulse rifle at the ready, senses straining for any sign of his scattered team. The jungle teemed with strange noises, and the smoke from the downed dropship clung to everything. "Livewire, Boom Boom," Dennis called out, hoping his troops had survived the crash. "Sound off?" One by one the humans emerged from the dense foliage, battered but alive. Sergeant Nguyen limped forward, clutching a sprained wrist. Corporal Jackson dragged himself out from under a tangle of vines, blood trickling from a gash above his eye. "Rough landing," Jackson quipped. "Let's not do that again." But Dennis's relief turned to concern as he surveyed the scene. Several Sheliak commandos lay unmoving amidst the wreckage, their carapaces crushed and ichor pooling beneath them. Among the dead was their commanding officer. Prylar clicked and buzzed in agitation as he took stock of his remaining troops. "This is a disaster. We're stranded on a hostile world with no way to call for extraction." Dennis shouldered past the Sheliak. "We're not stranded. We've got a mission to complete with or without your help." The humans set out into the jungle, using their earth-honed skills to navigate the treacherous terrain. They hacked through dense vines with machetes and skirted around murky swamps that bubbled with noxious gases. Prylar and his commandos struggled to keep up, their bulky armor ill-suited for the environment. As they trekked towards the distant mountains that housed Carax's stronghold, Dennis halted the group at the edge of a clearing. Smoke curled from cooking fires, and crude huts huddled together in a rough circle. The native villagers shuffled about with downcast eyes, toiling under the watchful gaze of Sheliak overseers. "Slaves!" Livewire hissed. "Carax's handiwork!" Dennis clenched his jaw. He had seen such oppression before on a dozen worlds across the galaxy. It never failed to ignite a righteous fury in his chest. "We're going to liberate this village," Dennis said, "and we're going to bring these people with us to take down Carax." Prylar buzzed in protest. "We don't have time for this. Our mission is too important to get sidetracked." Dennis rounded on the Sheliak, eyes flashing. "This is part of the mission now. We free these people, or we fail as soldiers and as sentient beings." The humans crept forward, using hand signals to coordinate their approach. With a series of precise shots and swift close-quarters takedowns, they neutralized the overseers and secured the village perimeter. The villagers emerged from their huts, murmuring in a melodic language and staring at their liberators with a mix of hope and trepidation. A tall, muscular native with a crest of colorful feathers stepped forward, a curved blade at his hip. "I am Tarok," he said in halting galactic common. "You have freed my people from the Sheliak scourge. We are in your debt." Dennis clasped Tarok's forearm in a warrior's greeting. "We seek to end Carax's reign of terror. Will you join us in this fight?" Tarok's eyes gleamed with fierce determination. "The Sheliak have enslaved and slaughtered our people for too long. We will fight beside you, and together we will bring down the mountain fortress." As the expanded group set out once more, Tarok proved an invaluable guide, leading them along hidden trails and pointing out the natural hazards of his world. But their progress was soon interrupted by a chilling sight. A patrol of Carax's genetically engineered warriors, their muscular forms bristling with spikes, and their eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. "Ambush!" Dennis roared, diving for cover as the monstrous warriors opened fire with plasma rifles. The humans and their native allies fought back, with a combination of military tactics and guerrilla warfare. They used the dense jungle to their advantage, setting traps and striking from unexpected angles. Tarok's warriors proved particularly effective, their primitive weapons and knowledge of the terrain allowing them to outmaneuver the larger foes. But the battle was fierce, and casualties mounted on both sides. Corporal Jackson took a plasma bolt to the chest, the impact slamming him back against a tree. He slid to the ground, blood bubbling from his lips. "Boom, boom!" Dennis shouted, laying down covering fire as he raced to his fallen comrade's side. Jackson coughed weakly, his eyes glazed with pain. "Guess I zigged when I should have zagged, boss. Rookie mistake." Dennis dragged Jackson to a nearby cave, the rest of the team falling back to regroup. Livewire hastily applied a pressure bandage to the wound, but her face was grim. "He needs proper medical attention fast," she said. "Our field kits won't cut it." Dennis ran a hand through his sweat-soaked hair, his mind racing. They were deep in enemy territory, with a wounded man and limited supplies. The crashed dropship might have the equipment they needed, but it was a risky journey back through the jungle. Yet pressing on towards the stronghold with Jackson in this state was a death sentence, and Dennis Foster never left a man behind. He turned to Livewire, his jaw set with determination. "Take Tarok and a few of his best warriors, circle back to the crash site and salvage what medical gear you can. We'll hold position here and keep Jackson stable." Livewire nodded, already checking her weapons and gear. "We'll move fast and quiet. Carax won't even know we were there." As Livewire's team vanished into the jungle, Dennis turned his attention back to Jackson, whose breathing was growing more labored by the minute. The young corporal had saved Dennis's life more times than he could count, always ready with a quip and a block of explosives. "You stay with me, Boom Boom," Dennis murmured. "That's an order. We've got a warlord to kill, and I need my demolitions expert." Dennis clenched his fists, his mind racing as he weighed his options. With Jackson's life hanging in the balance and the fate of the mission at stake, he knew he had to act decisively. "Livewire," he barked, his voice cutting through the tense silence of the cave. "Take Tarok and a handful of his best warriors, circle back to the crash site, and salvage what medical supplies and comm gear you can. Move fast and quiet. We'll hold position here and keep Jackson stable until you return." Nguyen nodded curtly, her face a mask of determination. She quickly assembled a small team and vanished into the jungle, their footsteps fading into the dense foliage. Dennis turned to the remaining troops, his eyes hardening. "The rest of you with me. We press on towards the stronghold. Tarok, I need your knowledge of the terrain and the fortress layout. We'll use stealth and sabotage to get inside and disable those damn shields." Pryler clicked his mandibles in agitation, his bulky form ill-suited to the humid jungle. "This is madness," he buzzed. "We should wait for reinforcements, not split our forces." Dennis rounded on the Sheliak, his patience fraying. "We don't have that luxury. Every moment we delay, Carax grows stronger. We stick to the plan." With Tarek in the lead, Dennis and his team set out through the jungle, using the dense canopy for cover. They moved in near silence, communicating with hand signals and brief whispers. Even Pryler, for all his bluster, fell in line, his survival instincts overriding his arrogance. As they drew closer to the mountain fortress, the vegetation thinned, giving way to rocky terrain. Tarok guided them to a narrow ravine, a hidden path that snaked towards the stronghold's outer walls. Suddenly a burst of static crackled in Dennis's earpiece. It was Nguyen, her voice tight with tension. "Boss, we've got a situation here. Found some kind of hidden Sheliak facility. Looks like a research lab. It's crawling with Carax's goons, but I think it might hold the key to this whole damn mess." Dennis frowned, his mind whirling with the implications. "Can you get inside, find out what they're up to?" "Already on it," Nguyen replied, the sound of a keypad being hacked filtering through the comlink. "Stand by." Long minutes passed, the silence broken only by the distant cries of alien birds. Then Nguyen's voice returned, edged with disgust and anger. "It's worse than we thought, boss. Carax has been experimenting on the natives using their DNA to create his super soldiers, and that's not all. I found evidence that Pryla's bosses in the Sheliak government have been in on it from the start. They've been backing Carax in exchange for the planet's promethium deposits. Dennis shot a cold glare at Pryla, who wilted under the scrutiny. The pieces were falling into place now, the true scope of the betrayal laid bare. "Download everything you can," Dennis ordered. "Then rig that place to blow. We can't let this continue." "With pleasure," Nguyen growled. "I'll grab the medical supplies and rendezvous with you at the stronghold. Nguyen out." As the comm link fell silent, Dennis turned to his team, his resolve hardening into something unbreakable. "You heard the lady. Let's get this done." With Tarok's guidance, they infiltrated the fortress through a series of drainage tunnels, emerging in the lower levels. They moved swiftly, planting explosives at key structural points and sabotaging power conduits. Alarms began to blare as they reached the shield control room, a squad of Carax's warriors bearing down on their position. "Hold them off!" Dennis roared, his rifle spitting plasma bolts as he charged into the control room. His fingers flew over the console, inputting the codes Tarok had provided. With a final keystroke, the shields flickered and died, the stronghold's defenses laid bare. But the victory was short-lived. More of Carax's troops poured into the chamber, their weapons blazing. Dennis and his team fought with the fury of cornered beasts, but the odds were stacked against them. One by one, the humans fell, their blood staining the metal floor. Pryla, his carapace cracked and oozing, stared at the carnage with haunted eyes. The evidence of his government's treachery weighed upon him, the scales falling from his eyes. In that moment, he made a choice. With a savage roar, Pryla charged into the fray, his plasma rifle joining the humans' desperate defense. He fought shoulder to shoulder with Dennis, their differences forgotten in the face of a greater evil. Just as the last of their ammunition ran dry, and the enemy closed in for the kill, a series of explosions rocked the fortress. The floor buckled and walls crumbled as Nguyen's reinforcements from the liberated village stormed the stronghold, their primitive weapons and indomitable spirit turning the tide of battle. In the chaos, Dennis caught sight of Carax, the warlord's genetically enhanced form towering over the melee. With a snarl of rage, Dennis lunged forward, tackling Carax to the ground. They grappled in a brutal hand-to-hand struggle, the human's tenacity and adaptive combat style pitted against the warlord's raw strength and augmented reflexes. Blows rained down like hammer strikes, bones crunched and blood splattered the rubble-strewn floor. But Dennis fought with the fierce determination of a man who had stared into the abyss and refused to blink. He battered Carax with a relentless flurry of strikes, targeting the warlord's vulnerabilities with ruthless precision. With a final brutal twist, Dennis snapped Carax's neck. The genetically enhanced warlord fell limp, his reign of terror ended at last by human hands. Dennis staggered back, his body battered and bleeding from the ferocious melee. Shattered ribs ground together and his vision swam. But the mission was complete. The tyrant was dead. Pryla limped to Dennis's side, his carapace cracked, ichor dripping. Around them, the last of Carax's forces fell to the combined human and native onslaught. Tarok's rebels howled in victory, even as Livewire and her tech specialists burst into the chamber. "Shields down, stronghold is breached," Nguyen reported, then faltered as she saw Dennis's ravaged form. "Boss, you look like hammered shit." "Feel like it too," Dennis managed a pained grin. "Sit rep, Jackson." Aishin's face fell. She looked away. "He didn't make it. Bled out before we could get him stabilized. I'm sorry, sir." Grief speared through Dennis, sharper than any blade. Jackson, the kid, had deserved better. They all had. But war didn't discriminate. It just took. Engines roared overhead as the council fleet arrived in force, dropships disgorging medical teams and security forces to lock down the area. As Dennis was placed on a stretcher, an avian counselor strode up to him, her feathers quivering. "The planet is secured," she said. "Carax's forces are in full retreat. You've done the impossible, Commander Foster." "Not impossible," Dennis rasped. "Just human." The natives cheered and celebrated their liberation in the streets. But for Dennis and his battered team, the victory tasted of ashes. They had won, but the cost... Prylar approached the councillor, his head bowed in shame. "I surrender myself to council justice," he clicked. "The Sheliak government was complicit in Carax's crimes. I have the proof. We must atone." As Prylar was led away in restraints, and the council began emergency meetings to root out the rot, Dennis was hailed as the hero of the hour. They wanted to pin medals on him, make him a symbol, a liaison. All Dennis wanted was to sleep for a year and to bury his friend. The funeral was a small, somber affair on Earth. Jackson's family wept as the coffin was lowered into the ground. Dennis stood rigid, his dress uniform hiding a myriad of bandages and scars. Physical, mental, it didn't matter. They would all remind him of the price paid. After the service, Dennis wandered to a nearby hilltop and stared up at the stars, remembering how it all began. Aliens laughing at the very idea of humans as soldiers. Well, no one was laughing now. The galaxy had seen what primitive apes could do when unleashed. When their backs were against the wall and all that stood between them and annihilation was sheer grit and audacity. Dennis would take the liaison post. He would ensure nothing like Carax happened again. And if the Milky Way's myriad species still snickered at humans in private, well, they could laugh all they wanted, but never again would they underestimate mankind's resolve. Dennis and his team had written that lesson in blood and defiance for all the stars to see. Let them look to the skies and remember. Remember that when the monsters came and the galaxy trembled, it was the children of Earth who stood against the dark and triumphed. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.